So we have to work on these reflex pattern, and then we need to understand, okay, what are the movement, what are the muscle groups we need to strengthen, work on, what are the exercises that we need to put together to help us differentiate upper body and lower body, continue to challenge them, give them the opportunity they may have missed growing up when they were a baby and not have opportunity for whatever reason they were not able to develop this coordination, brain-body connection. Okay, welcome everyone. In this episode, I will be going through the Symmetrical Tonic Neck Reflex, book number 3. And the previous episode, we talked about the different books. We talked about the Moro and the ATNR, which is book 1 and 2. Today, we're going to talk about book number 3, which is the STNR. And previously in the ATNR, I talked about how the ATNR, I tend to see, at least in my observation, I tend to see most kids with, if you're working with hyperactive kids, learning challenges, reading, copying from a book, and most kids tend to have some retention of the ATNR somehow and the STNR, and I don't know the research behind it much. I just know it by observation and by seeing these reflex pattern and doing these activities, how it's been supporting. And then I believe the STNR is also known as the learning reflex because it really influences learning, how the head is moving, and it includes visual perception as well as visual tracking, which is really important in the classroom, being able to read and write. And the STNR influences the near and far visual tracking, also the ability to crawl, and that's the right and left side discrimination, upper body and lower body, being able to coordinate, and the myelination and all those brain right and left side coming together. Probably that is something that I noticed the most. Incorporating this activity with the kids tend to support a lot. So, okay, let's go through the STNR. The STNR reflex pattern has 2 phases. The sensory trigger is the head moving up and down. So when the head moves up, so when the head extends like this, the upper body extends. And then when the head flexes, goes down, the upper body flexes. And the opposite happens to the lower body. So just with the STNR, think that the head and the upper body is connected, if that helps you remember, whatever helps you remember. And then, but the upper body and lower body move in opposite. So if the upper body is flexed, the lower body is extended. If the lower body is extended, the upper body is flexed. And the head moves, and the head and the upper body goes together. And so when these 2 phases come together, and then when organization and coordination is happening, the child has enough time to practice being on the tummy, moving and pushing, the hand supporting, being able to push. Head control is developed, the land out, all these other reflex patterns are working. Core strength is developing, and the child is now pushing up and controlling the right and left side, being able to hold the position on all fours. So the STNRs helps with crawling. So when they're on all fours and being able to look up and down without moving the upper body and lower body kind of tells us that there's a good integration in the body, and the child is able to control the body movement dependently and voluntarily, and it's not being taken over by the reflex pattern. So this is like one way of checking for the STNR reflex pattern, is having them on all fours and then having them extend the head and see what's happening. So some kids, when they extend the head, they might actually sit on their heels, or if they flex their head, they might actually drop. Their elbows might buckle, they might drop. So now think of it, this one is like, the reflex pattern dividing the body with upper body and lower body. So then you can look at what are the different things. If this reflex pattern is not fully integrated, what will happen? Of course, there's several things like we talked about in the other episode of ATNR influences. The vestibular influences the auditory processing, influences visual. Now this time around, it's near and far. With the ATNR was horizontal, right? So left and right. And now where the child is on all fours, what do? They lean, they look up like a ball moving. So this is just before they actually are mobile and moving towards an object. So they're looking at, okay, that object is further away. Now I can come towards it. So this is when they're learning body awareness and this progression. And even in the classroom, when you go in and if you see kids with these STNR retention, sometimes the obvious one you will notice will be the way they're sitting in the classroom. So there's so many different postures that you can walk in, and the goal is a skilled therapist quickly screen in the playground, be able to screen in the classroom. So one of the things that can happen is like their posture, you can start seeing the posture. So they might prefer sitting like this. They might prefer sitting on their heel. If you say like all feet down, so either the upper body is flexed like this, that means they are super extended and the bottom, the lower body, or you see them sitting on their heels the most. So because what does the reflex pattern? You just go back. It's just right there for you. So in order for them to extend the upper body, the lower body will have to flex. So we have to work on these reflex pattern, and then we need to understand, okay, what are the movement, what are the muscle groups we need to strengthen, work on, what are the exercises that we need to put together to help us differentiate upper body and lower body, continue to challenge them, give them the opportunity they may have missed growing up when they were a baby and not have opportunity for whatever reason, they were not able to develop this coordination, brain body connection. So there are several activities you can do. And this book, again, we have symptoms checklist for you to look at. This is on page 22 for the STNR and different exercises you can put together. You can start, modify them, make it really easy for them to start. The cat and cow is like one of the simple ones that you can start to see, but then you can also make it more fun. There are a lot of different activities that you can do with the kids, going through the tunnel, doing a lot of crawling activity, see how they do. But when they're crawling, remember, I know we're focusing on the STNR, but we have to be able to focus on other reflex pattern, because be able to observe other reflex pattern that might be affecting their movement. So it might be they might start to see that when they're crawling, they might have their hands fisted. It's not the STNR, that is a different reflex that we need to work on, which is we need to work on the hands supporting, and then we also need to work on the palm of grasp. But remind your kids to always open their palm and push down. So that's just a reminder, because those are the things I see the most whenever our therapists share their videos in our session. You kind of see kids like crawling with fisted hands. So just remind your kiddos to do that. There's a lot of different activities that we put together here for you that you can incorporate. There's a lot of fun things that you can do using scooter board. You can even do reflex pattern testing by doing some of the exercises. So you can see like, okay, when I place the child in, for instance, a scooter board activity like this, are they able to hold this position? So when we're doing a scooter board, I'm really dividing and then motor planning. This is a motor planning activity. If you're working on motor planning, you want to see that are they able to extend from the knee, or are they constantly in flex position? There are different joints that you need to look at when it comes to the STNR. It will be the shoulder, hips, and knees. Also look at the wrist and see whether or not they are aligned and they're able to extend and flex from those joints. Or you might see that the child cannot lift off and their knees are constantly flexed, and that might be a challenge. So you might need to go and modify to a different activity before you move on to this one. You can modify. There are, I believe, for the older kids, similar with the ATNR activity as well, we have a lot of older adults and older kids and teenagers and high schoolers that need to be working on these activities. So with some of the exercises you see are the more advanced activities. This is for our therapists who work with older kids and adults. It doesn't mean that you're opening this and then you have a 5-year-old and you're wondering like, how in the world am I going to get them to do certain activity? It's just not for them. So you have to have your own clinical skill and judgment to understand who this exercise is for. We do have different activities to kind of match the different population that we work with. But as a therapist, we're not just working on one age. We get a variety of ages, trying to make sure that every therapist is, or every client is included in this. So please make sure that you only pick the ones that are appropriate for your child. And even, I know we even have swings, like the STNR really affects the child's being able to pump a swing. I don't know if you've noticed that yet. This is something you can observe in the playground and then see whether or not they can differentiate and observe whether or not their head is moving together and if they're having difficulty. Really be an investigator and observing there. And then we have visual tracking that you can do if head control is very difficult and the child cannot move their eyes without moving the head, or they have a really weak core. This is the same with the TLR, the STNR, and the TLR that you're probably going to work on when they have really weak core. It's really hard to work on the visual tracking. So you can start to eliminate that by, placing them on the floor like that. And then just isolating the goal that you're trying to tackle. So if your goal is like visual tracking, then you start to modify the amount of exercise or the amount of demand that the body might have, and then work specifically on the goal that you're trying to tackle. So you can do that. There are several exercises here for you. Use the activities and let me know what you think. This is for the STNR activity, and all the suggestions are in there. And if you want the videos, it's inside our app, so you can access that. And then for the next episode, we will talk about the tonic labyrinthine reflex, which is book number 4. See you then.